The movie begins with Lemuel Gulliver, a middle-aged man, waking up in his cluttered New York apartment and going through his quirky morning routine, which includes talking to his superhero toys and dancing in the shower, revealing his fun, goofy side. Gulliver works in the mailroom of a New York newspaper company. On this particular day, he meets a new employee, Dan, and quickly befriends him. Gulliver is Dan's boss in the mailroom, but despite his years of service, he's never advanced in his career. As they deliver mail, Gulliver encounters his longtime crush, Darcy Silverman, a journalist at the company. He's secretly been in love with her for years, but has never had the courage to tell her. Later in the day, Dan reveals that he has been promoted to head of the mail department on his first day. Gulliver, who's been working there for 10 years, is frustrated, especially when Dan claims that Gulliver is too scared to take risks and will never progress beyond the mailroom. Feeling down, Gulliver notices Darcy working late and decides to finally ask her out. But when he approaches her, his nerves get the better of him, and instead of asking her out, he awkwardly picks up a random paper from her desk and leaves. Darcy, however, offers him a travel writing assignment, asking if he would like to apply for it. Nervous but wanting to impress her, Gulliver agrees and promises to submit a travel blog the next day. At home, Gulliver decides to take a shortcut and copies several articles from the internet for his travel blog. The next day, he submits it to Darcy, who is impressed by his writing and gives him a new assignment. She asks him to travel to the Bermuda Triangle to write about the mysterious disappearances of ships in the area. Eager to impress her, Gulliver agrees. Darcy arranges a boat and contact for the trip, and Gulliver flies to Bermuda the following day. Upon arrival, a man takes him to a rented, automated boat, showing him how it works. Excited by the adventure, Gulliver sets off alone toward the Bermuda Triangle. He spends the first few hours relaxing, reading magazines about robots and drinking cans of Coke. However, he soon falls asleep, only to wake up to a massive wave heading his way. A sea storm hits, and as his boat violently shakes, he sees a huge sea tornado approaching. The boat and Gulliver are sucked into the tornado, with Gulliver being pulled right into its eye. The screen goes black. When Gulliver regains consciousness, he finds himself unable to move. Looking down, he is shocked to see tiny men standing on his chest. Their leader introduces himself as Commander Edwardian of Liliput. As the camera zooms out, it reveals a large crowd of tiny people surrounding Gulliver, who is pinned to the ground by tiny ropes and wooden structures. The commander refers to Gulliver as a beast, which confuses him. Panicking, Gulliver breaks free from the ropes. Still believing it's a dream, he closes his eyes in disbelief. The commander orders his soldiers to subdue him, and they attach hooks to his pants, eventually knocking Gulliver unconscious. When Gulliver wakes up, he finds himself tied to a cart, being pulled into the kingdom of Liliput. The tiny residents come out of their homes to gawk at the beast. He is taken to the royal palace and presented to King Theodore of Liliput. The king's daughter, Princess Mary, feels sympathy for Gulliver and questions whether the restraints are necessary. Commander Edward insists that Gulliver is a spy from their rival kingdom, Blefuscia. Gulliver finally speaks, asking the king where he is. The king's secretary, Jinx, informs him that he is in Liliput, the greatest nation in the world. Gulliver thinks it's a prank and jokingly asks for the non-existent cameraman to reveal himself. In the next scene, Gulliver finds himself imprisoned in a cave, where he meets another prisoner named Horatio. Horatio was sentenced to life for trying to court Princess Mary. Commander Edward approaches them, listening to their conversation and referring to Gulliver as a lame ass. When Edward threatens to imprison them for life, Gulliver quickly claims that lame ass means someone who is brave. Pleased with this answer, Edward takes both prisoners to a field, planning to use Gulliver's strength to plow it. Just then, 2 rings of a bell ring from the palace, signaling that Blefuscia has launched an attack. They are attempting to kidnap Princess Mary and have set the palace on fire. Edward rushes back to the palace, ordering everyone not to save the princess because he wants to be the one to rescue her. However, Horatio urges Gulliver to save her instead, as Edward won't make it in time. Gulliver quickly takes down the Blefuscian soldiers and saves the princess. He realizes that the king and Jinx are trapped in the fire. In a panic, Gulliver urinates on the building to extinguish the flames. The crowd cheers as he successfully saves King Theodore from the fire. The king releases Gulliver and Horatio from imprisonment, expressing his gratitude for Gulliver's bravery. He invites everyone to a feast that night to celebrate. Edward, however, is furious to see Gulliver receiving praise for his heroism. At the feast, King Theodore asks Gulliver where he is from, and Gulliver replies that he hails from Manhattan. The people, misunderstanding, assume he was the president of Manhattan because he is the bravest person they they've met. Feeling like a hero for the first time, Gulliver exaggerates, claiming he was known as President the Awesome. Everyone believes him except for Edward. The next day, the people of Lilliput build Gulliver a massive home equipped with amenities he could never have in New York. Gulliver also asks them to construct a theater large enough for everyone in the kingdom. He then puts on a dramatic performance about the sinking of the Titanic, presenting it as the story of his life. The audience is captivated by the tragic tale he spins. When Edward asks how he survived the drowning, Gulliver claims he was resuscitated. Later, Horatio asks Gulliver to help him win over Princess Mary, and Gulliver agrees. They go to the palace, where Gulliver secretly recites the lyrics to the song Kiss, prompting Horatio to repeat them. By the end of the performance, Princess Mary starts to develop feelings for Horatio. However, Edward arrives to court her, as he is destined to marry her due to his reputation as the bravest in the kingdom. Although Mary isn't fond of Edward, she feels trapped by the situation. Meanwhile, the search party discovers Gulliver's washed-up boat, which still contains cans of Coke. Gulliver arrives and finds that his phone is still functional. He discovers he has 12 voice messages from Darcy, who is furious about his plagiarized article. Darcy has to embark on the same journey Gulliver took to research the Bermuda Triangle herself. Faced with the prospect of returning to New York and confronting her, Gulliver decides he wants to stay in Lilliput permanently. Edward, feeling suspicious of Gulliver's intentions, expresses his concerns to the king, but King Theodore dismisses him, insisting he trusts Gulliver. Because of his extended stay in Lilliput, the king appoints Gulliver as the new general, demoting Edward to vice-general. Jealous of Gulliver's newfound status, Edward disables Lilliput's defense system, making it easier for their enemies, Blefuscia, to launch an attack. The Blefuscian soldiers and their king plan to strike immediately, approaching the kingdom by water and firing cannonballs at Lilliput. As the new general, Gulliver feels the weight of responsibility and nervously wades into the water. He easily withstands the cannonballs, which are ineffective against his larger size. In the end, he defeats the Blefuscians and becomes the hero of Lilliput. In gratitude, the citizens fulfill all of Gulliver's wishes, building a model of Times Square to make him feel at home, changing their clothing to resemble his, and even assigning soldiers to cut his hair and give him massages. Meanwhile, Edward barges into Princess Mary's chamber, claiming it's his right to enter any time since he is courting her. Frustrated, Princess Mary tells Edward that she doesn't love him and wishes to end their courtship. Infuriated, Edward leaves for Blefuscia to seek assistance from their king. Edward's men discover the Build Your Robot book Gulliver had on his boat, and the Blefuscan king agrees to help Edward construct a robot to battle Gulliver. Days later, while Gulliver is at the model Times Square, the palace bells ring, signaling an invasion. Gulliver prepares to face tiny opponents, but is taken aback when a massive robot, operated by Edward, appears before him. Edward challenges Gulliver to a duel, and Gulliver reluctantly accepts. He tries to push the robot, but soon realizes it is far stronger. The robot lifts Gulliver by his pants, forcing him to admit defeat and confess that his claims of being the president were lies. The king and Princess Mary are shocked and disappointed by Gulliver's betrayal. Edward punishes Gulliver by sending him to a forbidden place known as the island where we dare not go. Once there, Gulliver is picked up by a giant little girl who mistakes him for a toy. She takes him to her Barbie house, dressing him in frilly pink clothes. Meanwhile, back in Lilliput, Darcy's body washes ashore. Since Gulliver had claimed Darcy was his princess back home, Edward recognizes her and has her imprisoned. In the dungeon, Darcy meets King Theodore and his queen, who have also been captured following Gulliver's defeat. Noticing the situation, Horatio decides to venture to the Forbidden Island to rescue Gulliver. Although he is tiny on the island, he manages to reach Gulliver. Inside the girl's dollhouse, Gulliver discovers a skeleton of a dead U.S. Air Force pilot. He uses the pilot's parachute to escape and flies back to Lilliput. Gulliver first visits Darcy in prison, where he confesses his feelings for her. She forgives him for plagiarizing the article, and they start to connect. Determined to help Lilliput, Gulliver decides to challenge Edward to a duel. He proposes that if he wins, Edward must return the kingdom to King Theodore. If he loses, Edward will destroy Lilliput. The next day, they face off in battle. Gulliver initially struggles, and Edward quickly overpowers him. However, Horatio rushes in to help and manages to get inside the robot controlling Edward. From within, he defeats Edward, allowing Gulliver to easily conquer the weakened robot. The crowd erupts in cheers, and even Darcy joins in the celebration. Because of Horatio's bravery, he is granted permission to court Princess Mary, and they share a kiss. Just then, Edward, now insane with jealousy, takes the princess hostage. However, she stands up to him and fights back in frustration. In a tender moment, Darcy kisses Gulliver for the first time. As tensions rise again between the Blefuscians and Lilliputians, Gulliver intervenes. He helps broker peace between the rival nations by reciting Edwin Starr's song War. Eventually, he and Darcy return to New York City on their repaired ship. Weeks later, Gulliver has left his mailroom job and is now a travel writer. He and Darcy are happily together, and as they exit Darcy's office hand in hand, the movie ends. Thank you for watching.